got my intro all queued up and ready, and it'll be fun.
All right, we
Sounds
are
good.
live.
Oh, sweet, we're live. Thank you. Oh, we've gathered some of the best beards on the internet. Will, you've always had an impressive beard, except for that Computer Chronicles video. You don't have a beard in that one.
I didn't grow a beard until 2010, Adam.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well,
Yeah,
what made the
it
change?
never connected. It never connected before then. That was when I was finally old enough for the side to hit the sideburns. So,
Steve, have you never not had a beard?
Yeah, there's definitely some old videos where I actually bothered to shave.
So for you, it's a laziness thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's normally you can tell how much time I've had in a week based on the progression.
Okay, I like it. Yeah. Actually, we do have somebody who doesn't have a beard. I mean, you got a little bit of stubble. Dan over on the verticals and horizontals.
Yo, this is my 1 week stubble. I
There you
probably
go.
shave like once a week.
That's
you could have told us he had like a Santa Claus beard there.
That's
He'd have
true,
been ZZ
yeah.
Top over there. We wouldn't know.
Yeah. Well, the stream will see him.
Okay.
That he's living. Oh,
Adam, is there a sponsorship thing you're not telling us about, like Dollar Shave Club? Or...
oh crap! Yeah, no, actually, so Leaf Razor. I've switched to a Leaf. Have you heard of Leaf?
No.
This isn't an ad, and we're not sponsored by Leaf, but it's actual razor blades that you put in rather than like getting the wasteful cartridge thing. You actually put in razor blades. You like snap it in half, and then you layer 3 of them on it, and it's like it's awesome. The razor blades last for months and months and months and months and months.
Is this the one with the ad where the guy is like, we build parts that nobody else, we machine the parts that nobody else can machine? It's like the
I've never seen
YouTube thinks I
ads.
need a razor more than anything else, basically.
Oh.
Which, I mean, maybe they were not wrong.
Yeah, I've never seen ads for it, but yeah, you're essentially just buying the handle. They do sell blades as well, but I mean, I had no idea people get like real deep into blades, like Japanese blades, like imported and stuff like that.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
Of
I was
course.
just like, all right, you get the weird. Yeah. Anyway,
Go to Home Depot too, right? Like just get a big 600 pack for like $3
There you
and
go.
let it rip.
Yeah, I hear Milwaukee makes the best shavers.
really? Oh, Milwaukee, the brand.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I thought you meant the state. I was like, you know what? I've never been to Milwaukee, so I can't confirm or deny that.
The 21-inch hedge trimmer, you just start at the bottom and work your way up, and probably fine.
Gas powered or electric powered?
I think electric on my face would be my recommendation.
I mean, that's pretty manly if you've got a gas powered shaver, right? Be fun.
It seems reckless, but okay. Seems like something somebody do on the internet.
Well, you know what else is reckless is this podcast so far. Welcome. I see people filtering into the chat. We got Civilized Gamer that says, thanks, Steve. Oh, funny enough, Steve, we interviewed the thanks,
yeah.
Steve lady, and
Yes.
I forgot it was that was her, Michelle Holthouse.
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah. Mark interviewed her during Intel Innovation, and then there was just a number of comments in the comments being like, "Hey, isn't this the Thanks Steve lady?"
Well, we reported on the interview you guys did because you were talking about Meteor Lake Desktop, and so that one I was not aware of her title. Before that, I'd only ever seen her in that one presentation, I think,
Oh, really?
and it's something like director or VP or something of.
Client Computing Group. Yeah,
That's right.
she's the high up there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, oh, well, we still get sampled. So.
Yeah. No, she's.
Oh, that was a good interview. Yeah, I thought that one was good. And who was your interviewer for that? I forget.
It was Mark Hockman.
Mark,
was
okay.
there with us. Yeah.
Yeah, Mark did a good job. I noticed he asked the same question a couple times just to really make sure. Sometimes you're in an interview and you got to make sure everyone understands each other because the answer originally I think was unexpected. So
Yeah. Well, and then he didn't have time to get even deeper into. We had very limited time, so it was just
Right.
like, all right, let's go.
Those show floor interviews are hard. Like it is. Like it's such
Right.
a wild card of the interview world. It's not like sitting down on the podcast with somebody. We have 30 minutes. You get like 8 or 10 minutes on the outside for those usually. And
Yeah, and you're like, okay, we got to find a place to do it. was, and we had to hurry and find a place that didn't have super loud music so we get demonetized. But I think you can still hear the music in the background. But whatever, lighting and mic people up, and anyway, we got all the cool friends of the show here. All the cool cats have come to hang out with Will and Steve. Will, Steve, have you ever met each other? No.
I feel like I know Steve for a long time because I watched his videos for years, but no, I think this is the first time we've ever met.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I saw. Are you doing a podcast now?
Yeah, so I do a podcast with Brad Shoemaker, who's at Nextlander, formerly of Giant Bomb, and it's spun out of the old Giant Bombcast segments where we would just kind of sit out and talk about tech. Like I'd come on the show and we'd talk about whatever was going on in tech, and people seemed to like that, so we were like, let's do a podcast, and then we did a podcast, and we just finished our 200th episode a couple of weeks ago. So we've been at it for 4 years now, which is fun. But yeah, and we do it every week. It's single topic though. We don't do news. So we honestly right now, the thing that's looming over me is we're doing a Bluetooth, like a Bluetooth triptych, which is three hour long episodes about like how Bluetooth works, why it's always kind of janky and weird. And like there's probably a whole episode in there about the audio specs and how that stuff works. Cause like it's, when you look at it, when you plug in your headphones, you're like, oh yeah, this just works. But when you look at how it actually works and how many different codecs are involved in the latency codecs and the quality codecs and all, like it's really complicated and crazy. So let's just dig in.
That'll be fun.
Yeah.
Well, I liked your recent episode about the Microsoft graveyard, or all the things that Microsoft has killed. I was hoping you would get into Silverlight more, but I get it. There's only so much you can talk about.
I mean, Silverlight, the impact was that it got rid of ActiveX, right? Like that was the best thing that it did. The weird thing about we did a graveyard episode for Google a few years ago, and the difference was the Google graveyard was all like stuff that were like, man, I wish we still had Google Reader. I wish we still had Inbox. I wish we still had like these 10 other services. And with the Microsoft one, you're like, yeah, no, man, I absolutely see why they killed the Zune. That was the right choice. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Good episode. And also, real quick, before we start, Will, you're going to be at the Bay Area Maker Faire next weekend, right?
I am. That is next weekend,
right? Yeah, it's coming up.
I can't remember. It's here for 2 weeks, so I either bought tickets for this. I'm not sure if it's this weekend or next weekend that I'm actually there for.
Okay.
I think it's this weekend. There's also an annular solar eclipse this weekend in the Western U.S. So.
And are you doing anything at the Maker Faire, or you're just showing up?
I'm walking around with my daughter doing Maker Faire stuff because Maker Faire is her favorite thing. She loves going to Maker Faire, so she was excited that it was back.
Speaking of fairs, if you could deep fry one thing and eat it, Steve, what's your go-to? You bring it with you and you ask them to deep fry it and then you eat it.
What about like?
Or it could be a computer
How does it? Yeah. I don't know if a deep fried video card is
that'd be a good video.
Great idea. Yeah.
Gordon would do it.
I don't know. Can you double deep fry things? What happens if you bring fried chicken to a place to deep fry the fried chicken?
I mean, Korean fried chicken is like double fried.
Yeah.
All right.
There you go.
There you go.
You just bring a bucket of KFC and you're like, can you deep fry this for me?
I'm ready.
when we were at Max PC, we used to do we did the oil bath PCs. I think we did them in mineral oil and stuff like that, but we also tried one in regular like vegetable oil because it's non-conductive. Theoretically, it should work. And if I remember right, it went real badly and all the glue started coming apart on the boards and stuff like that. It wasn't great. It was a mess.
Well, you don't put fish in the tank at the same time.
No.
Speaking of which, I need to get that case from you, Will.
I'll bring it in.
Yeah.
It's just aging in my garage. It's the red and silver one, I think John Phillips actually got the BMW one.
Oh, really? See, I thought it was that BMW one. Oh, okay.
No. The BMW one was gorgeous. This one was the next year, I think, which is the red, and it's the one that inexplicably had a little screen on the front, as Gordon said, because somebody in the chain was like, I think we should have a screen on the front of the computer. And we were like, man, I don't think we can have any software to put anything on that screen, but I cut the hole and we jammed it in there. So
Gordon always pushing the envelope, huh?
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Speaking of Gordon, we're going to catch up a little bit about the Gordon news. We're going to talk about some hardware reliability and just kind of the overall state of hardware where we feel like it is right now. And then RAM testing. Obviously, Steve does a lot of awesome testing, and Will has some interesting ideas about some RAM testing. So,
Oh, nice.
Interesting ideas.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. And we got a $10 super chat from Dark Helmet, friend of the show, Dark Helmet. Thank you so much. Said for my maximum PC subscription, keep up the good work. They don't print anymore. They stopped printing recently, but
In April, I think. Yeah.
but they still have a digital edition, I think. PC World has digital edition. You should sign up for PC World magazine. Just a repurpose of the. Yeah, you'd be surprised how many people sign up for the digital edition of the magazine.
I miss getting the book in the month every month. Like I miss getting the thing you open up and like it's all old news.
Oh,
guess.
you know what would be a cool service where if you sign up like, hey, once a month we'll send you an old magazine from the past, from that month's past. Wouldn't that be cool? You're like, hey, I want a tech magazine, and from a month in the past, and they just kind of switch up. Sometimes you get a Max PC, sometimes you get a PC World.
I mean, that'd be kind of cool if there's been this stuff like this day or this month in whatever year, right? Like this month in October, and I had to look at the calendar to check what month it was.
Yeah,
that was
right.
good. That's always great. October in 1998 or whatever, send you an edition out of the pile. That'd be kind of cool.
Wouldn't that be cool, right? Yeah. Yeah.
So the Video Game History Foundation does that with old video game magazines. So if you subscribe, because they have this enormous collection and they have a bunch of dupes, and if you give them $20 a month, they'll send you a box of magazines every month.
So actually, I talked recently with Frank here. We're going to get him on.
Frank's great. Frank's a fabulous talk.
Anyway, man, we're just sitting here talking about random junk. We should get the show going. Yeah. Okay. You fine gentlemen ready for me to
Sure.
do my intro?
Okay to go.
Dan, are you ready?
Yeah.
With the intro to go. Let me bring up the notes. Clear my throat. I feel a burp coming. I'm not going to do it. Here we go. In this episode of The Full Nerd, we talk about Gordon updates, hardware reliability, and RAM testing. There we go. That's good. Welcome to episode 274 of the Full Nerd Podcast. Checking my notes. Yep, that is it. I am your fill-in host for this week, Adam Patrick Murray. On the line, I have two important bearded gentlemen. The first one is Steven from Gamers Nexus. Thank you for coming in, Steven. I know a lot of people don't know your work, but I wanted to bring you on and introduce yourself.
It always helps, to have someone who cares. So thank you, Adam.
I do care, Steve. And then also on the line is Will Smith from. I was gonna write down in my notes here from Everything. You work on the Anacrusis video game. Go pick that up. Brad and Will make a tech pod. Before that, you were at Tested. Before that, Maximum PC. Do you go all the way back to boot with Gordon, or?
The first thing I wrote for Maximum PC was the third issue of Maximum PC.
Wow.
I was at Ars Technica from 98 until 2000.
Oh, Ars. I didn't know that.
They switched over from boot to Max PC in like late 99, I think.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, you go way back.
Way back. Yeah.
Speaking of way back, Willis is just prancing around over in Europe right now, so I had to get a fill-in Willis, which is actually Dan, who used to work here years and years ago. Hi,
Good
Dan.
morning, everyone.
Yeah, good to see you, Dan. It's Dan has been freelancing. We don't have credits in our videos or anything, but he does edit some of our videos. So he freelances here and there, and then when Willis was like, "Hey, I need to take a vacation," I don't know who approved that. I did for some reason. But yeah, I was like, Dan, I want to get Dan back in again. So thanks.
Yeah, it's always good to be back in the office.
Yeah, nice hat too. You're wearing a full nerd hat. There we go. Playing the part. Anyway, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. We got a fun episode going. I think let's just dive into the first topic, which is Gordon. If you hadn't heard, you should definitely go back and listen to last week's special edition of the Full Nerd. I actually sat down and had a good long chat with Gordon. We only planned it for being like half an hour, but he was so excited to get on the mic and start talking about stuff. We ended up going for a little over an hour. So that was pretty fun. And specifically, we kind of wanted to talk about where he's been, what he's been up to. He revealed on the show, if you haven't listened yet, that he is battling cancer, and so he's officially on medical leave. That's why he's not hanging around here. He needs some time, obviously, to deal with this, but in making the video, it was definitely something we had been working on for a while, and it was tough, but I think it was ultimately good that we got it out there. And thank you for the kind words. There were so many people who came in on YouTube, and maybe I don't know about you, Steve, but I'm just so used to like negative comments coming in that it just felt so good to have a video where like every single comment on there was just people being like, hey, I usually never comment on YouTube videos, and she wanted to say, hey, I've been reading Gordon's stuff for over 20 years, and everyone has been super nice, so thank you about that. And then Steve, you even left a nice message too. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll say too, the comments when people do say, because I was reading the same comment section, when people do say, hey, I never leave a comment, but I wanted to, then they write a message for Gordon. To me, those are always the ones that I really sincerely appreciate, because
right.
That says someone actually thought whatever the topic is that they're commenting on was important enough to, okay, maybe they don't think it's a good use of their time to write internet comments, and this particular thing they thought it was, and like those are always the ones that I try to really pay attention to. So it was nice to see. I'm glad. I know Gordon was reading a lot of them as well. So
yeah, super heartfelt. Friend of the show, Ziv. I think you know Ziv, Steve. He says, Gordon has been defeated by the internet with love. Yeah,
a very rare occurrence. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, in the course of the talk, I'm not going to recap the whole thing. You should definitely go back and watch it or listen to it. But he definitely has plans to get back to it. Obviously, his resolve to get back to testing is huge, and I'm hoping for a speedy recovery on that. We'll talk more about it later, but it has been, I can say from chatting with him, I know both you, Steve, and Will have been chatting with him as well offline, and like he's somebody who definitely has a hard time missing out on things. His FOMO is very real.
Yeah.
Steve or Will, you go way back with Gordon, even way further than Steve and I.
For sure.
Has he always had that that he just loves to be in the thick of things and hates missing out on things?
Yeah, I mean, this is the longest I ever remember him being away from work in the 20 years that I've known him. Like when he scheduled his wedding, he looked at the release calendar and they figured out the time based on like when IDF and when all the different stuff that he goes to and cares about is, so that he could take, actually, like, I think he took 2 weeks off, during which time we filled his cubby with boxes to the ceiling. So
that still happens.
Yeah. I mean, the difference was it was maybe a little bit cleaner before he left than it usually was. We just wanted to let him know he was missed. So yeah, he's always been like this, and is always there. Like always. I don't ever remember missing a CPU event ever.
Yeah,
so.
No, he missed the launch of the Ryzen 7 7800X3D earlier this year because he had got COVID, and yeah, he was just like, oh, he was so angry about that. So
yeah.
Obviously this is a different situation, and he's really focusing on getting done what he needs to get done, but he's definitely chomping at the bit to get back to it. So
well, and he's got a lot of good support from his family and his extended family, and I know you all are taking good care of him and all that. So he's focused on healing now, which is what he should be doing, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So, and in the time that he needs, I said this in the last podcast, but I'll reiterate, please give him some privacy and space while he deals with this. And we'll be in communication on the episodes, if there's any updates or if he has a message that I'll pass along. But yeah, in the meantime, he is watching and lurking when he can, and luckily we're working in the background. He has been helping me a lot,
and helping you with a CPU bench, right?
He's helped me with that stuff, but then especially innovation. That was the first event that we went to. I mean, it's a smaller event, but it was the first event we went to without him. And I was messaging him and be like, hey, I heard this, I saw this, check this out. How should we cover this? And yeah, so I
said this in the comment also, but for not that I think any of the meaner commenters are necessarily watching right now, but be nice to Adam, because Adam, you've been doing you have a massive amount to have to try and cover with like the CPU launch coming up and producing the whatever content you guys are producing. And I told you before privately, but I sincerely, you're doing a very good job. So
well, thank you.
The field reporting's been good. You got a couple exclusive pieces a while ago. So I mean, I like I said before, I like that you and Gordon are able to kind of cover for each other where you each need it. So
I don't know if I would say I'm covering for Gordon. I'm no Gordon, never will be, but yeah,
no one is.
Yeah, definitely not. But I think it's funny because when I first started here, like I had followed Gordon for a long time, and I was just like, oh sweet, I get to work with Gordon, hell yeah, that's awesome. And so I remember going to our first, probably CES was I think the first time I got to shoot with him. Dan was there too at the time, and I remember just like following him around. I was just a camera guy, just following him around and be like, oh wow, everybody loves Gordon. Yeah, Gordon's awesome, isn't he? And so yeah, it does feel weird now to kind of be on the other side of things. So
well, it's a thing. It's a thing. I felt the same way when I started at Maximum PC in 2000, right? Like I was like, oh man, I get to come hang out with Gordon. I get to learn with Gordon. I get to sit here and ask him questions. And I'd been reading his stuff at that point for 2-3 years, I guess. But it's when you walk around the show floor, it's not just like Gordon is divisive sometimes in terms of in his online persona, but the amount of love he gets both from fans and viewers and readers, and also from people on the other side of the table at in industry meetings, like you earn that kind of respect from people in the industry by giving good, honest, fair reviews for a really long time. And a lot of the times he would write a negative review of something, and then you'd hear, and the next time we'd go to a meeting with them, they'd be like, well, look, we all knew that, but people weren't listening to us, or we thought it was going to be a problem. We didn't think it was going to be that bad, or whatever. And it's hard to overemphasize what a kind of pillar he is in the space. So everybody's rooting for him, and everybody's hoping he gets better soon.
Hell yeah. Yeah. And it is he's definitely missed. So we hope he gets back to it as soon as he can. But hey, take as much time as you can. Do what you need to do, Gordon. We miss you for sure. So like I said, we'll provide updates where applicable. But in the meantime, yeah, I'm just trying to hold down the fort and not light too many things on fire. So yeah.
Well, you'll have CPUs to do that with soon.
Exactly. So let's move over to the next thing. Speaking of being reliable, hardware. So Will, you kind of brought this up because you've been itching for the past couple weeks to talk about this. You've had. All right, I'll back up. Sorry, we did a build. What was it? God, when did we do that?
November, December.
Yeah, somewhere
around
that. We did a live build. Brought you in, was like, hey, let's build a new system for Will. You were on a 9900K with a, I can't remember, a 3080, something like that.
3080, 4090. So I might have had the 4090 in there, but it was right. It was like the CPU was throttling that video card pretty hard. So.
Definitely. So we were like, oh yeah, let's come in, let's build together. But you have had nonstop problems with this rig, and it's kind of making you question the reliability of PC hardware right now, right?
Well, so it's one of the things I'm stoked to have Steve here, because I'm curious. You spend more time with more hardware, I think, than either of us. But we've reached a spot with CPUs, especially where we're kind of like they can't just drive. coast on process stuff anymore to get faster. So they're having to make these processors increasingly complicated. They're doing things like moving the memory controllers around, and like I'm wondering if you're seeing lower reliability kind of across the board. I know you just did a big kind of survey of a bunch of different hardware, and I was curious what your take on that is, and if you think it's a real. It's hard for me to tell because I have a single sample, or well, 3 samples at this point.
Yeah,
I've sent a bunch of hardware back, but
right. A lot of ours is, in the grand scheme of things, low sample size. I mean, the biggest sample size thing we did was that 68 CPUs, and I think the most we did of any one was 23 or something, but we didn't have any failures or anything like that. And the sort of unit to unit, I guess, reliability of the spec was remarkably consistent. So that was cool to see. It feels like there's more stories about like failing, for example, 12-volt high power cables, the NZXT H1 case, the Gigabyte power supply, the X3D CPUs with the Asus boards. But I still think that may be kind of an amplification effect where a lot of those don't actually originate on media. They originate on social media like Reddit.
Yeah.
And just because of how big those sites are now, you get one person who has one thing happen, it gets pushed up to the top. And then someone else had that thing happen. They talk about it. So it's really hard to differentiate. Like, this might be kind of a normal amount of failures. It's just we never really heard about them before because it was handled through an RMA process, and no one was interested in posting it on Reddit or something. So
it also feels like maybe the tools for diagnosing the failures are a little bit better. Like you're able to tell more. Like before, you just be like, oh, my CPU is blue screening, and we swap out memory sticks. It's not swapping out memory sticks didn't fix it, so it's probably the CPU, right?
Right.
Whereas now you can stress individual parts of the CPU or hit just the memory controller or whatever. And
software's gotten very good. Yeah, for user level diagnosis, I definitely agree with that. I think it's gotten very powerful, and there's great tools you can buy for cheap now. I mean, you can buy cool power meters and things like that from Elmore's lab, sort of enthusiast tool makers, basically. So definitely agree with that, which maybe also kind of builds the case for we're hearing about failures more because people have better access to understand them or try to understand them. So I definitely don't have any numbers to suggest like a higher failure rate overall. That said, I really wouldn't be shocked if the products coming out during the sort of COVID supply shortages might have trended higher on failures, because it seemed like everyone was running faster than maybe they could try and keep up.
There's also, especially around the launch of a brand new system, I know I had horrible problems getting RAM stability. Well, we'll talk about RAM a little bit later, but keeping RAM stable on my 12900K system, I was just like, wow, I can't overclock this worth anything. I mean, that's not just a hardware thing for sure, but yeah, I mean, so around any kind of new launch, it definitely happens. So Will, you're saying, I mean, in all these years that you covered at MaxPC, like you don't feel like there were these groundswells of hardware problems over the years?
I mean, we definitely had some hardware that was bad. I was there during the Death Star days, right? When your IBM 75 GXPs would run really well for about 6 months, and then they'd just start dropping like flies. But I mean, and there were definitely CPUs and GPUs that were difficult, right? Like some of the late era Pentium 4s where they were just cranking out a ton of heat for the coolers of the time, and like you would see overheating problems. The NVIDIA 5800, GeForce 5800 was notoriously loud, so they could keep that thing cool. And then we always, we did a write-in column every month where when August would hit, we'd start getting letters from people as their rooms were getting warmer and their power supplies were getting less efficient and the power was sagging, and they'd be like, hey, my computer was fine 2 months ago and now I'm getting black screens all the time. And that's just straight up, your power supply is not big enough for your 85-degree room, but it works great when your room's 70 degrees the rest of the year. So
I have a question for when you were working at the magazines, So these days, everything happens really fast from a coverage perspective. Something pops up on Reddit and it's a product failure of some kind, and anyone who's thinking about covering it, you make a decision pretty quickly. You start trying to collect information, and within days, you're probably talking about it. And obviously, it's easier to collect information now with how widespread forums are and things like that. But in the early days of Max PC or other magazines, especially, if you guys heard about some type of big story like product failure or whatever it was, controversy about a product, I'm assuming it got to you maybe a little slower, or at least it popped up on the radar slower. Like, how did you deal with latency?
Well, so they were pretty good. They were still message boards back then. It wasn't like centralized. We didn't have the one. Reddit has essentially absorbed all of the other message boards with a few exceptions.
Right.
But like Hard OCP was a really high traffic back then. I think Tom still had at that point. Tom hadn't been bought by the French publisher, and they still had message boards. We had message boards at Maximum PC from 2000 on. And we would get reasonably good traffic on like kind of hot button issues, but the thing you didn't have was that filter that bumps up the one that, like, because like you said, 50 people hitting the same post on Reddit can bump it up to the top of one of the hardware boards on Reddit. And it gives you that loop. So at Max PC, when we were doing technical troubleshooting, we tried to cherry pick the questions that would help the most people, because it was a 350,000 person magazine, and across those 350,000 people, you had everybody from like in 2001 there would have been people running like Pentium 60s still, probably, all the way up to somebody running a 800 megahertz Pentium 3 or something like that. So you kind of had to kind of look for the broadest possible thing, and we didn't dig down into specifics too much. Now, the place we did get into specifics was in Gordon's column, which was the Watchdog, where he would kind of go after malfeasance in the industry. And that's why people like that was one of the places he got early chops, was by calling IBM and being like, "Hey man, we've got 300 people have written us that their Death Stars have failed." And then he'd talk to the lawyers and he'd look into LexisNexis and all sorts of stuff to track down people whose companies had disappeared or whatever it was, and that kind of stuff. We would connect people directly, and I think he even did that if it wasn't for publication. Like if somebody wrote in and was like, "Hey, I have a question about this," he'd direct them to the lawyers doing the class action for their refund or whatever. But it wasn't like, it was harder to reach out. It was harder to get back in touch with somebody, because like you'd send them an email, you'd have a bunch of questions, you send them a big long response, and like 3 times out of 10 they wouldn't respond at all to the email. But you're like, "Hey, I need some more questions, more answers to help you follow this up."
So when you were was there any challenge with chasing on a magazine publication cadence? Like, did the story become, was there more concern about it becoming irrelevant within a month, for example?
I didn't know, because like the people, there weren't as many people doing the work even online at the time, right? Like AnandTech and Tom's, to a less extent Tom's at that point, but like Anand was doing really good, like kind of chasing stuff down, but was still mainly focused on big releases at that point. And the little stuff was more something you did to kind of fill in the content gaps. We did that when the magazine went online in 2005, maybe, I don't know. It was around the time I was became the editor. We launched a website. We started chasing that stuff a little bit more then as well. But it was like the shortest turn from a story we wrote to, for example, when the GeForce 3 review came in, they gave us early access, and it was 3 weeks before the embargo that web people had, and literally the embargo was timed for our print for the first day that it could be out of the printing press to people, right? So because Jensen wanted the cover, he wanted a picture of that chameleon on the cover, and so I literally went down there. I spent 2 days running benchmarks, and was like, "Hey, this isn't a review. This is our preview of the hardware that'll come. The reviews will be in the next month's issue, and here's what the early benchmarks imply. We had a whole big conversation about whether I was going to bring one of our test benches so we could compare benchmarks across. I eventually won that fight. That was a big point of contention. But I drug a benchmark machine down, one of our test beds down, ran all the benchmarks, and then came back and benchmarked everything else afterwards that we had in the house. And but the scary part of that, what that's like. You get one shot at that, and like if you mess something up when you're sitting in the conference room at NVIDIA, you can't go back and do it again.
Right. Yeah.
And also, I had 26 hours or something from the time I sat down in that conference room to write the actual article. Or write the benchmarking section of the article. I guess I'd had the tech briefing before that. So, but then people had that 2 weeks later.
Changed.
Yeah, it was still 2 weeks later, and like we still were on just a bust ass deadline to get that that done and laid out and in the magazine and through proofing and all that stuff.
That's wild. I got two questions. Good questions from the chat. The first one, sorry, I lost the name, but oh, here we go. Joel Miller asked, are drivers included in this conversation? Because I feel like that's a whole separate thing. It's like, do you feel like drivers are more or less complicated nowadays? I feel like it's probably less complicated, but I don't know. What do you think?
Steve, I don't know. I think to me, on the GPU side, with all of the modern tools they're pushing as like software packages accompanying the GPU, that seems like it's gotten very complicated. Because you start looking at things like GeForce Experience and the Radeon Suite and all this. Everyone's trying to pull in as many things that used to be third-party tools as possible into one first-party package. And well,
but at least, I mean, the idea of, hey, you throw a piece of hardware in there, and right. For the normal user, Windows is probably, I mean, if you have Windows Update correctly running, it would download the latest driver, and sure, or actually maybe it's not even the latest driver, but it's close enough.
I think 100% from a user experience, it's probably gotten a lot easier because there's like you said, Windows does a lot more of it for you, at least at a basic level, and it seems like it's harder to kind of screw up and cause driver conflicts. I remember that being a much bigger problem years ago.
It doesn't happen as much these days. There's a weird kind of liminal space though between like the person who never thinks about this stuff at all and the person who thinks about it sometimes, where like you have to know what the Intel Management Engine does now, and you have to update that with your BIOS updates have to include that, and like if you get those things out of sync, then you can cause problems for yourself. And like I think it's more complicated in maybe a not ideal way a lot of the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also. It's like I think of I helped a family member build a PC during the pandemic, like remotely kind of thing, and then he was having some problems, and so we kind of connected a little later. And later, I don't know why he must have switched the HDMI plug to the motherboard, and was just playing off the IGP, and it was just like, wait, you didn't notice? He was like, nah, I didn't notice. I was just I don't know why it was running where
Yeah.
And so I mean, but that's like obviously lower. Not everybody here is on that. I think if you're watching this stream, you're almost maybe too tuned in to the the exact parts and what they do and all that kind of stuff. So.
No, I've definitely I forget where it was, but. There was it might have been when I was at Best Buy the other day, actually, I think, but I overheard like a Geek Squad conversation where they're realizing that the customer was not really using the components to the fullest potential, which I think, if I remember correctly, had to do with a driver configuration issue and something else. So I was eavesdropping on Geek Squad. I was kind of curious what they try to deal with.
You're just there with a little like megaphone and
while I'm shopping for SSDs.
Like, this guy's weird. Huh? Okay.
Are you ever tempted to help out when people are asking questions in the sales? Like,
I stop myself.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I try not to interfere.
That way lays danger, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the other thing too is when we're talking about hardware reliability, we're talking about heat, right? I feel like now more than ever, people need to think about thermals. and even if it doesn't break anything, it at least limits the capability of what you're doing, because you're like, oh, why is it running slow? Well, it's really hot. What do you expect? So like, but you had a problem with your AIO on that build, but it wasn't around heat and throttling, or what was the specific problem you had?
So I had an NZXT Elite. I can't remember, 53. I think it's the two 14 centimeter radiator, two fan 14 centimeter radiator. Yeah. And it was a USB problem. Actually, it was not getting enough USB power. When I ran it directly with the cable that they provided, it would hang up and lock up fan control, mostly on suspend and resumes. And then when I put just an internal USB, like an internal header USB hub in the case that had direct power, completely solved the problem. Which is like, think about how you troubleshoot that one when you don't have a whole lab full of hardware. It was great fun. They sent me a new one. It did the same thing. It was I was a real pain for the NZXT support people. They were very helpful though. It was a little slower than I would have liked, but they were really helpful. The weird thing though has been the memory stuff with that machine, because we kind of, when we built it, I do Unreal development at the day job, and Unreal 4 especially loves memory bandwidth. So I had mentioned that in an offhand way to Adam, and he's like, let me show you this 7800 mega transfer per second DDR5 memory we have. We're going to put this in here. And I was like, this is...
And a 2-slot board, or a two DIMM board, to get that real fast memory overclocking.
Like we made a stupid... Like, it's a fun... I love the PC. It is a stupid PC in the best possible way. And like I started getting crashes in Fortnite and PUBG. Both of those are games that use EAC. It took me a long time to figure out, because other games, I could play Starfield, I could play other games that use ray tracing, Cyberpunk, whatever. Everything was fine, no problems. And then I went and looked at the event logs, and the crashes I was getting in the EAC games, easy anti-cheat games, weren't showing up in the Windows logs. So it was EAC detecting something screwy and just crashing the game, because that's what EAC does when it thinks that somebody's cheating. So because of the way easy anti-cheat works, and I found this out by talking to one of the engineers at work, is they basically just take all the addressable memory, all the available memory, say, hey, we're going to use all of this, and then they shuffle registers around inside that space, and as soon as they detect something that doesn't checksum right, it crashes the game, because it assumes you're trying to make your own writes to memory to change how much damage a bolt gun does or whatever. And once I looked at that, I went and loaded up a bunch of other EAC games, and I started seeing the exact same crashes in all of them. I was like, oh, something's up with the memory. So I got some slightly slower DIMMs, put them in, the problem's been solved.
So was it basically memory instability was triggering EAC to think that you were hacking effectively?
Yeah, and it's memory instability that didn't show up in memtest, even on the extreme testing, or in like OCCT. Like all of the normal things that I use to test for memory stability were passing clean, even on the ultimate torture test modes, which I've never seen. Like usually if your memory's bad, you run memtest and it's like, oh, hey, your memory's bad. And I wasn't getting that with this, which was a trip. The one thing that I haven't isolated, because I don't have a bunch of CPUs here, somebody was like, maybe it could be the memory controller on the CPU when you're running it at the high clock. But I don't know. I put the 600 MT DIMMs in, and everything's fine so far. So 6,000, sorry, not 600.
600 would
600
would probably fix it too.
Yeah, I mean 600. Probably the old DIMMs would have run at 600.
I don't know if it won't offend me if you said no, but did either of you happen to see our AMD interview with Bill and Amit talking about stories about Ryzen when it was first coming online?
Oh yeah. When you went down to the actual place in Austin.
Yeah.
No, that's a good interview.
So, reason I bring it up is just because the 600 MT, because they were telling me about how it was coming down to the wire to get a demo ready for, I think it was like an internal company demo, if I remember correctly, of, hey, here's Ryzen, this is the first one, it works, it boots. And Lisa was going to be there and all this stuff, so the pressure's on. And they told the story, and he said how they couldn't get it to post with memory. And through all these trials and problems, they finally got it to work. And Amit from AMD said we finally got it to post at 18, and it went right past me because I was thinking like shorthand 1866, and he said no, like literally 18 period 0.
So they're running at SD RAM speeds,
Yeah.
basically. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so
Wow.
That was relatively recent too.
well. So for
Yeah.
the EAC thing, because this is the question I had when you quickly told me that story. Will, do you think there's a way to replicate that? Because if you're saying like all the usual RAM testing methods did not show that, but EAC was the only one that kind of like was able to detect that, hey, something was wrong in there. Is there a way to replicate? Steve, could you make that a test in your test
Oh man,
bench?
I wouldn't. That'd be a gnarly test. It's basically, I think what you have to do is load up Fortnite and just play Fortnite, because the EAC is not going to cooperate with anything you ask them for, I don't think.
Right.
You just have to play Fortnite for 3 hours and see how many crashes you get. I don't know. I'm curious what you think, Steve. Yeah.
I mean, if I feel like any kind of anti-cheat or anti-piracy software is always a good topic if you can. The challenge with them is figuring out how to represent what it is, what the shady behavior is, that you think is there, reliably, because like you said, it's a black box. You can't really see into it, so it's very hard to diagnose. But I think those topics are great because like Denuvo, some people have done this test, we haven't, but testing basically a pirated version of a game without something like Denuvo versus the legit version, what's the performance impact? One of the reasons we haven't done it is because it's a little unclear to me from a YouTube side, like what their policies are, for
Yeah, it seems like you could get a strike from the publisher for something like that.
Yeah, because you're effectively admitting that you've pirated the game, because that's the only way to do that test. So that's kept us away from it. But I've seen some people do those, and they're interesting because sometimes there's big performance costs for that stuff. So
I haven't looked at that. I mean, part of it these days is that the computer is fast enough. The computers are fast enough that like the impact of the anti-cheat is going to be lower than it was back in the early 2000s. We definitely did some Denuvo tests so the place you can do that is often they'll patch the Denuvo out after like 6 months.
Oh, okay.
But then it's still hard to get a apples to apples because you're comparing like different
Right.
versions of the same software maybe. So I'd be curious what the impact of that stuff is though.
So to get to some practical advice real quick, because I'd like to at least try to ground that, like when we're talking about the hardware reliability stuff and then the RAM stuff, like what are you guys' go-to? Let's start with you, Steve. What is your go-to for when you're like, oh, you know what, I'm having some sort of hardware problem? What steps do you take? Like, even if it's just the most basic steps, like, I mean, the joke is like, have you defragged the hard drive or rebooted?
Right, or
but
plugged it in or whatever.
Yeah.
No, that's
off.
a good question. Yeah, I think the standard steps are, it depends what it is, right? Like if it's a no boot issue or a black screen issue or something, that's pretty templated. I feel like you kind of typically will start with, obviously, check all the cables, check all the power, because I think one of the most common ones for any PC builder, but especially inexperienced ones, is forgetting like the EPS 12-volt cable or something, where it's up there in the corner and you were going to go back for it and you forgot it. That's a common one. But otherwise, normally it's going to be after checking cables and making sure everything's seated fully and properly. For me, typically RAM is the next stop. Unsocket both sticks, socket one, swap them. And if you have two sticks and single stick, you still can't get it to boot, it's probably not the RAM. So normally I go to CMOS at that point. You pull the battery and reset the BIOS, and typically that finds it. If you don't find it by that stage, then you're probably replacing hardware. So
yeah, to at least get to a post. Yeah,
right.
To be like,
yeah.
okay, well, what's going on in there? What about in Windows? Say you're having like driver crashes, anything like that. What's your go-to?
Best advice I have for GP related stuff, especially, is DDU, display driver uninstaller. which is maintained and freely available. Um, Very good software. You can use it to basically just clear out all of the display drivers that might be installed in the system, and so you can start fresh. So I would always do that from safe mode. There's an option in it that makes it easy to boot into safe mode, run DDU. That at least purges the drivers, and then when you install it next time, it eliminates some of the chance that there might be like some kind of weird conflict or something. But that's probably that would be my number one tool. Hardware info is another great one for diagnosing things like thermals.
Yeah, but Will, what are some of your go-to steps for troubleshooting hardware or software?
I was just saying the old, when I was at Maximum PC or Tested, it was a lot easier because you just drag the machine into the lab and then you just keep swapping out hardware until it works. And you're like, okay, well, it's probably the thing that was the last thing I swapped out. It's for me, I do a lot of work on the computer and like it's not like it's a test bed where I could just nuke the OS and start from scratch and see if it's a Windows. Like it hasn't been a Windows problem for me in so long. I don't even think about that anymore. I run an SFC scan now to make sure there's not some sort of weird file corruption. And then I boot up the memtest disk because in my experience it's almost always memory, especially since I tend to buy relatively new hardware. And like if you like we talked about this when we built the PC, but like I assumed that the DDR5 that we put in that PC last fall wasn't going to last super long. I didn't think it would last quite this. I thought it would last a little longer than this, but I didn't expect it to last forever, and the prophecy was fulfilled, I guess. The other one is like Gordon recommended OCCT, I think, for me to do stress test on CPU and memory, which is really convenient because like it just runs in Windows. I don't have to boot out of everything. I can kind of do other stuff in the background, but not really. And that's been handy for letting me know when I'm relatively okay. But honestly, this EAC thing has me kind of shook because if memtest doesn't pick something up, we're in a whole new world here.
Yeah, and I mean for the times that I'm helping, a more newbie, who doesn't know this stuff too much, it usually comes down to updating drivers, like being like, hey, did you run whatever the Windows update is, or check out the latest GPU drivers, things like that, or even game drivers sometimes too. People are like, I pushed it off because I would rather play the game than update it, something like that.
Right.
I guess it's less nowadays, but yeah, like I feel like a lot of people I hear, family members and friends and stuff, they're just like, oh, I know that update was there, but I paused it because I just didn't want to deal with it right now. I'm like, you should probably, set aside a little bit of time to deal with it.
I think that's especially common with the gaming side, where, I mean, for us, being more in the space, I always forget about this, but that when a game launches, most people probably, especially outside of the core audience that any of us would address, but I bet most people probably don't go update their GPU drivers immediately when Starfield launches or something until they have some issue. And then if they know how, or they're aware of it being a thing, maybe they'll begrudgingly update it. But which I kind of get, because at the same time, it's like, we don't generally update the firmware on our cameras once we're happy with them, because it's like,
unless there's a news post that's like, oh, hey, it unlocked this new feature. Like, oh, okay, cool. Oh, wow, I was that far behind. Oh, dang.
Yeah.
But it's funny as the games are more tied into the driver, like with the DLSS 3.5 stuff rolled out with Cyberpunk a couple weeks ago. I was seeing posts from people in Discords that I'm in that were like, hey, this looks much worse than the screenshots made it look like it was going to look, or the videos made it look like it was going to look. And it turns out they hadn't updated their drivers, and it was just some weird in between state. And when they updated their drivers, like, oh yeah, it's not as doesn't look as potatoey as I was expecting from the first pass. So.
Whoops. We have a freak, a friend of the show, Freak777 Power, says disable core isolation. Is that something you would recommend to a normal users, to disable core isolation?
Isn't that a security thing?
It is, yeah. You find it in the Windows security section. And I know, Steve, you like turn it off for testing, right? Because it can affect testing.
Yeah, some features we definitely disable. So, We actually, well, we use more now than we used to, but yeah, some security features we'll get rid of. Windows Update we pause. As soon as it's like, okay, the bench is set, pause Windows Update. Don't let it screw with anything until we're through the cycle, because a lot of times the cycle's like 1 to 2 weeks, so it's reasonable to sit on one Windows version, just so you're not testing across multiple versions. But that said, as some features become default on and very prevalent, a good example would be uh, Windows Game Bar or whatever it's called. We used to leave that explicitly off, but these days for a lot of our testing we have it on. So it always depends. But normally with newer features and anything that's not default on, we tend to try and turn as much off as we can.
Are you all testing on Windows 10 or Windows 11 these days?
We use 11 now. Yeah, we're fully on 11.
Yeah, Gordon's always been hey, as soon as the new thing's out, you might as well just test on that.
Because any new hardware is going to ship with that, right? Like if somebody's going on buying a PC, it's going to ship with the new version of Windows, not the old version of Windows.
Or at least he'll check with the company and be like, hey, what did you test it at? What do you recommend? We tested at, kind of thing. At least to get to what they recommend. Not that he always follows it, but at least to understand, like, okay, in the lab we were using these parts with this version.
I was just talking with him about that actually, about reviewer guides. So they, for people who may not know, the larger companies especially, or almost only, but will send out what they call a reviewer guide with new hardware. So sometimes these are incredibly useful, and sometimes they're really not. They're just kind of telling you how to do your job, except in a way that best shows the capabilities of the product. And normally we don't read them at all, or I don't, but typically Patrick on my team will take a look at them for product setup and things. So it works out really well because it allows us to just make sure we're catching, is there anything really important that like some feature needs to be enabled that you otherwise might not be aware of. An example would be the X3D processors, like 7950 X3D, where there's some specific setup, and power plans that need to be enabled to get it to park cores properly. So that's an example of a very useful review guide. But I was talking to Gordon about it because he almost, well, from what I understand, he almost always will read them or at least look at them. And I almost never do. Like I said, we have someone on the team who will kind of just make sure, but I like to isolate myself from whatever it is the manufacturer is saying. And when Gordon asked why, I said it's because I can't help myself, where if I feel like the guide is it's got too many recommendations that I think are kind of BS, that's not really like part of the product. It's more of it's a manufacturer talking with a reviewer, and I don't want that to influence how I'm representing the product from a consumer standpoint, because a lot of times it'll piss me off, if the review guide is really stupid.
Well, I used to do video cards. I never really worked in CPUs, but the video card review guides were a real weird mix, because they were like half white papers that were like, hey, here's like this, here's why shader model 2.5 is important, right? Like, which like I already knew, right? I knew why we were excited about new shader models and video cards at that point. But then you could look at the way they were testing stuff, and if you read between the lines, you could see what it was that they were worried about,
right?
And it was like, oh, okay, so I should poke at this stuff more. But you're right. And when you're doing video, especially when you're working in print, it was a little bit less of an issue because you have time to think about what you're saying. But sometimes when you're doing video, you run out of words for a second. You're like, and I don't want to find myself parroting a thing that I read in the reviewer's guide, just accidentally even. So I totally respect that. I get that, Steve.
Well, that's a good point about the white paper aspects, because when a lot of times they're separate now, but sometimes there's still some of those like technology discussion within the review guide, and that's actually really useful if there may be, I don't know, like when tensor cores and RT cores became a thing. That's, none of us are, at least in the media, are aware that far in advance of the product's new features that like this is going to be old news to us. It's probably still useful. So yeah, that aspect is useful.
You make a good point though about and it really depends on company to company though, where it's like, oh, how useful is the information versus, is it just like marketing regurgitation, and then it's our job to kind of sift through and understand, what is important or what needs to be tested. Will, how far back does that go? Did it start off, at least in your experience, like very technical for the technical people, and then at some point just kind of like ooze into a little bit of marketing, or has it always been kind of a mishmash?
So we had to like I said, I didn't work on the CPU side at all, so I never really was. I'd occasionally tag along with Gordon to meetings, but at the magazine, often we were working before that stuff was done, because they do those reviewers guides for the websites, and they would land afterwards, or we'd get like a couple of the white papers or kind of stuff that they had done, but like their benchmarking guides weren't done yet. Like they ship with the review kits for new video cards or whatever. The thing, we had to fight to get them to be more technical with us. Like we had to ask for that. I remember I sat down with Tony Tomasi one time, and probably GeForce 3 or GeForce 4 launch. And Tony's a great guy, but he's like a product marketing guy. He's not the person making the engineering decisions necessarily. He's the scientist, right? That's doing the math, that he's figuring out the math that they need to accelerate, and somebody else does that. But he said something like, I was like, well, what's the upper limit for this, for programmable shader stuff? And he was like, oh, it's probably 1600 watts. And I was like, wait, what? 1600 watts. He's like, yeah, that's the most we think we can reasonably get out of a North American wall outlet. And here we are with 1200 watt power supplies 15 years later, 16 years later. But like I had to like, as I was digging down that question to find out why he said that, the PR person was sitting in the corner just melting into a puddle, because they were like, good God, we do not want to talk about this. This is exactly the kind, nobody cares about this. All they want is the number at Fry's. They want the box with the bigger number on it at Fry's, and ours has a 4 and the other team has a 3. So we're going to do better this generation. It's like, you're past the point where you could just put a big number on the box and expect it to sell. You have to actually explain why your thing is better. And like, you have to work with us to do that. That's part of the deal. So, yeah.
It's interesting to me too. Some industries I feel like are still kind of developing the technical approach to reviews, like not outside of computers. I was thinking about this a couple of days ago, because I was shopping for mountain bike components, and I realized there's some really cool stuff that could be done with testing. And we ran into this with cameras too, but where some of the processes for reviewers, I think, haven't fully matured yet. So it's really interesting to see how adjacent industries, develop their own technical version of media too. Like with cameras and DP review or whatever it was called.
Yeah, DP review was like, I was gonna like
charts.
The camera people have been good for a long time, and like, if you ever went to a Canon Media Day, they had multiple tracks usually, where you could have like hey, I want to know exactly how the sensor works, or I just want to know what it's like to take pictures with this thing. And like, I think both of those are kind of valid review points, right? Because there's a lot of photographers who don't care about the strobe rate of the CCD sensor or whatever, right, and just want to know, is this one going to look better than my last gen one?
Well, I mean, with camera stuff, and maybe it applies to PC hardware a little bit too, but like with camera stuff, like it can. Yes, there's the technical abilities of not only what you're working with, but also you yourself as a photographer or video or whatever, but also like it's a creative medium at the end of the day, so you just work around whatever those limitations are. Like as I've gotten older, like I was definitely like a gear lust kind of person. I don't know about you, Dan, probably the same thing, but like early on I was like, oh man, if I only had this camera or this lens, I could do better stuff. And then later in my life it switched to, give me the crappiest thing and I will do whatever the best I can do with that. Like I didn't feel like I needed the best hardware anymore. So what do you think? Same thing?
Yeah, I'm probably similar, but I'd ask you if you think that's just because like you're getting older and that's how you feel about everything, or specifically video stuff.
No, I mean we were even talking about this earlier. Like I have my editing rig at home is an i9 with a 4090. And I'm to the point where I'm like, you know what? I don't really. I mean, when I need it, but I don't need it all the time. I can probably just get away with like an i7 or maybe even an i5, like, and then not have all this heat spewing into the room for
I
nothing.
have an FX 8370, I think, at home.
Right? Yeah. And Gordon,
Yeah.
I mean, he has I don't even remember what Gordon has, but he's got a real old system at home too. Yeah. So now I'm starting to see that too, of like, you know what? You need what you need. You know, you can do with what you need. You don't always need the biggest.
It runs Windows 7 just fine.
Yeah, there you
Well,
go.
But I mean, the thing for me is often I'll take the thing that's working well and doesn't take me down for a week to get the new machine set up, right? Like that lost week is a big deal at this point.
Yeah.
I can't take that these days.
Yeah. Anyway, we got real far off RAM testing, so let's switch over to the Q&A because I get some more questions to get into. If you got a question now, put it in the chat at PC World. That's kind of the easiest way for me to see it. If you're watching or listening to this later, there's a link in the description to our Full Nerd Discord. We have an awesome channel over there where you put a question in and hopefully I get to read it. First, before I keep going, I want to say Skeet Sayer, friend of the show, Skeet Sayer, gave us $2 Canadian. Thank you so much. Said cables are a huge issue in GPUs today. Yeah, definitely check your cables. Make sure
I'm excited
they're
about
fully
that.
inserted.
That power add-on for cards in the future. That's a good change.
Oh crap! I had a
Level 2x6 or.
Yeah, well, it's the new. Don't
The
they
new
have something
spec.
that's like like at the end of the slot that's going to provide through the motherboard?
Oh yeah,
the 12-volt power or whatever.
Yeah, I forget what the current name is for that. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they'll call it the Speed Force or something. I'm sure it'll get a stupid marketing name before it comes out.
And I want to go back to review guides for a second. Friend of the show, Dr. Ian Cuttress, Tech Potato, is in the chat. Ask Steve who the biggest culprit is for crappy review guides.
I mean, I
If you wanna
won't
say.
mince words, I guess. The most recent one that bothered me was the what is that? Ray Reconstruction Cyberpunk. So NVIDIA's was the most recent.
For DLSS 3.5 or
Yeah, because some of their test recommendations, we said it in the video, which is why I don't mind surfacing that. But some of the recommendations included like auto settings, which in Cyberpunk it auto kind of adjusts with the resolution, so I get it. It's somewhat fixed, but there was also a lack of true A to B comparisons where they always had you testing in the worst possible configuration versus the best, but these things would combine multiple technologies like FrameGen and DLSS and things, to mix it all into one pot. So then it's difficult to decipher really which technology exactly is providing what value. And
that's a classic.
Yeah.
That's like a rollback to 2003. Did they normalize, like, what did they normalize the bars on? Was it like a 1 to 1.1 bar or 1.105?
To their credit, I think the last time that conversation came up was actually this year, and the rep I was talking to did point out that the scale started at 0, and I was very proud of them for that. I was genuinely happy.
We made fun of them in the magazine in the early 2000s because they did that. It was so egregious. It was like a 1.101 to 1.1.0 scale, and I was like, "You're literally calling out a 2% performance increase, but the bar, like one bar is like this wide, and one bar is
Like
3 inches
100%.
long, and the other one's a quarter of an inch long." And I was like, "Come on, man."
Oh,
We're nerds. We understand math.
Right.
Speak for yourself. I hate math. So to go back to the question about reliable enough, we had a good question in here from friend of the show, Ivan Remanazov. I butchered that. What would you guys say is reliable enough? Right? There's always going to be some sort of problems out there, sample size, but then you're always going to run into something. But like, what do you feel like reliable is enough? They added on to and said there are hardly any maintenance-free engineering solutions outside of microelectronics. So I think the PC community is spoiled again.
I
mean, for me, it's no lost work, right? Like
Nope.
if I lose a podcast, if I've been working on Unreal for 4 hours and Unreal crashes, then I lose a whole bunch of work, and like I don't ever want lost work. And outside of that, I'm fine. It's a low bar, but also a high bar, I guess.
What do you think, Steve?
I would agree with that. I remember that reminds me of years ago when I was in the middle of a lot of the overclocking battle stuff with Jay. Totally separate from that, I remember talking with David Cantor, who's an analyst in the industry, technical analyst, and he mentioned to me that the memory in his home PC was running like JEDEC spec or just below it or something. He had issues with losing progress or just crashes or something, and so he set the memory to the minimum required to still function but never cause problems. And I remember at that moment, because I didn't really get it yet, I was thinking like, but there's so much, you can have so much more performance, right? But these days I actually, like in some of our editing machines, we're running basically like 4800 or 5200, DDR5. That's by, I guess, spec considered bottom of the barrel, but the stuff we do with it doesn't seem to really benefit from faster, and we never have any memory problems, which matters for production, matters more. So yeah, I would agree with no lost time to troubleshoot issues, especially if your job is kind of dealing with that all day anyway. So
well, and your all's production pipelines are like I'm having worked on a video site that's a much smaller scale than you all run. Like it's no joke, like the pressure to keep that kind of funnel filled and keep everything moving. So it's hard.
Well, what about on the other side? What about the actual hardware? And I think it depends on what we're talking about specifically, but there was a lot of talk around the whole 12-volt high power thing. How many people were actually affected? How many cards were out there? Some people are like, you know what? I mean, we're talking about less than 1% of the people who have these cards are having these problems, so it's not that big of a deal. But then on the other side, people are being like, oh no, like this is a serious deal. Like, what about that? Like the actual reliability of the hardware coming out? Like failure rates, I guess is maybe a better way to say it.
Yeah, 12-volt high power. At one point, I had a number from they cleared me to share it. We hadn't gotten around to it, so I'll share it now. But Cable Mod, at one point at least, this is probably, it's been months, but they had about, I just ran the number again. I think it was 80 out of 80,000 units had failed. Which gives it, I mean, that's
0.1% or something.
Yeah, when I was talking with them, I think they were saying that was within or below their usual failure rate. Now, that story changed a little bit, which is why we didn't get around to covering it, because they ended up doing like not technically a recall, but they kind of reissued the product and offered a credit to get a new one. And so my suspicion is that maybe that number climbed rapidly at some point, but it's still an interesting number, because at least that would have been about probably March to May timeline. They were at something like 60 to 80,000 units sold, and they're at fewer than 100 failed. I think part of the concern though is that when it's a catastrophic failure like that, it's far more severe, and especially if there's a chance of any kind of fire, right? Like now it's much more significant than like, an IC on your memory died or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, it's kind of like a plane crash, right? Very. I mean, you're more likely to get hurt in the car going to the airport than the actual plane crash, but the plane crash is going to be more catastrophic.
And because of the rarity of it and the situation of it, it's much more covered. So especially when you're talking like in GPU's $1,600 video cards, that's obviously a lot more upsetting to have that fail. You're probably not going to write a forum post about your $10 USB key failing, but
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And part of having dealt with some failures this year, I will say that the RMA process, like some companies are really good at RMAs and some companies are less good at RMAs. Like the NZXT outcome was ultimately positive, but it was a 30-day turn from the time I sent the first email or sent the first support request to the time I had the replacement hardware in my hands. When I had to swap out the CPU a couple months later, Intel had a new CPU on my desk 3 days after I sent the support ticket. Right. And that's not me calling special favors in. That was me just using the normal RMA process. And I did, I mean, in fairness, I did pay for I did give them a credit card so that they could charge me if I didn't send the old CPU back. But I'm happy to do that to get that quick turn on the hardware. And that is on my main computer. That is always I'll always take that option basically. So. It's something I'd love to see more coverage on, actually, is how's the RMA process for, ASUS and G.Skill and all the vendors that we use and talk about all the time, because I think that my guess is that they will vary pretty wildly, and also it's a place where folks tend to save money because nobody talks about it really.
I would also say, yeah, we've covered some of them in the past as kind of one-offs, and that's an area where we decided to kind of just push past you get into sample size stuff, right? Like maybe you land on a support rep who's not trained, who's having a bad day, whatever. But to us, because it's not realistic to test at a 100 sample level or something, especially without being found out by the manufacturer.
Holy crap! This one person's returning 100 motherboards.
This one address sure causes a lot of problems.
Really weird.
Yeah. But yeah, we kind of decided, well, it's a case study, right? Like the experience is what the experience is, and it's fair to review that experience. And I guess you could do some kind of prefacing in the language to say, whatever, this is the GPU department. We haven't tested the monitor department or the laptop department, but even still, it's a fair representation. But the NZXT one's interesting because if I remember correctly, when we tested theirs, that was one of the ones we tested. I think the experience might not have been good for us. I know that was one of our higher view videos, but that was years ago, and that was for BLD. So hopefully your experience with it indicates improvement.
I had to do a little bit of work. Like, it was one of those ones where I had, like, Intel, when I sent Intel the note that was like, hey, my CPU is not passing mem test, blah blah blah, they were like, oh, okay, hey, just here's the RMA number, we'll deal with it, we'll eat this, right? Because it's an expensive CPU, and you're clearly you're a customer who we value. I didn't get the same vibe from NZXT, but I did ultimately get, like I said, the positive outcome. For me, I think it's about process. Like, if you can do enough of it to get an idea of what their process is, do they offer an expedited cross ship? Do they, how do they immediately act like you're a dirtbag trying to scam them out of RMA money? Or is it, hey, we're sorry you're having a hard time? I feel like once you get off of the script, then you're into uncharted territory, and you should kind of then it's not fair to pick on the one customer service representative who's either not trained well enough or had a bad day or whatever.
Right.
But you're right though. It's an interesting challenge for sure. Like it's not a trivial undertaking.
Kind of going on that reliability concept.
Yep.
And you guys all have tons of spare gear, but do you recommend everyone keep like a backup of everything? Because like 25 years ago, I used to keep my old motherboard, old, modem, old everything, and be like, okay, if this one fails, because they do,
when you get a new one, your old one becomes the backup.
Exactly. But now the last however many generations, I'm like, you know what, I don't need, it's been reliable enough.
That is a good question.
Will, what's your approach? You mentioned a couple times having all access to the lab in the magazine days and stuff like that.
Well, the magazine days was a little easier, right? These days, so I do a little bit of streaming, so I have a spare PC to do the stream when I'm playing games, and so that PC tends to be my last desktop PC. So when something went wrong with the main desktop PC, that one just moved over a notch in the order and became the boss again.
It's a succession of it's like a monarchy of computers.
Yeah. It's why you have the best man at a wedding, right? Sometimes the groom, just scooch him over one. Your next, congratulations.
We got to put you in, coach.
Yeah, it's your time to shine, Billy. But yeah, beyond that, like before I started working on Unreal, I could have done a lot of the work that I did on a laptop, which is actually what I did when I had computer problems. These days, it's a little more difficult. I think my laptop would weep under the load of a 300 gigabyte Unreal project.
That is a good point, though. Yeah, like I feel like me personally, if I wasn't in this space, yeah, I would just keep my old stuff around. Like unless I like really need, like I don't think I'm in a spot where like, oh man, I really need to sell this because I really need the money. I mean, it's more so that like I probably won't need it at all, but at least it feels good to have there. But I guess once again depends on what you do, because if you're not doing super heavy lifting like Unreal or video editing, like maybe a laptop is a backup. Like if you're like, hey, you know what, I mostly need to get online, a laptop could be a backup.
Or you balance it. Maybe you sell the most. I did this a long time ago. It might have been when GN was pretty new, but I would keep the last PC I built, but sell the GPU, because then, okay, I could still use it. I'll just pull. It's probably not the GPU that's the problem in the new one. So then you could kind of liquidate your most expensive thing, try and get some of your money back, and you still have some reliability. But yeah, I'm definitely in terms of work, kind of spoiled for access to computers, because like the whole team, everyone's got their own computer. So if I have a problem with mine and I need to edit a video, I can go sit at an editor's PC if they're not using it. But personally, I think the approach of keeping the last system around makes sense up until your RAM or something doesn't pull forward anymore.
I mean, or the CPU, right? It's like, okay, well, great, I have an older CPU, but I can't just socket that in. You'd have to swap out the whole motherboard and rip apart the whole system. So,
although I will say having like a NAS or something makes all of that a lot easier, because then at least if your system goes down and you have to do a drop-in replacement, you rush to Best Buy and buy whatever piece of crap's on the shelf, just to keep moving. At least all of your stuff is, you just remap the drive and you're done.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a weird situation, because like, I mean, Steve, you and I and Adam, I think like we don't make money if our, like when my computer is down, I don't make money.
Right.
It turns out. So and it's nice to make money. So it gives me a little bit of a different perspective than when I was sitting at Maximum PC, and like they were like, I would roll in, the IT department would hand me a loaner laptop when I torched my desktop machine that I was working on. But I was still getting paid regardless, right? If I had to reinstall Windows, if I take 2 days to reinstall Windows, the checks would still come on Friday, so it wasn't as big a deal.
Yeah, that's kind of all right. We got some more questions here I want to get to before we get out of here. A good one came in from Sort of Fast over on the Discord. Is Steve more of an SSF person, mid or big case person when it comes to gaming rigs? With Gordon around, you couldn't even ask that question. So
no, this is a trap if Gordon's here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, Gordon, if I remember correctly, has some extremely strong opinions about
small form factor.
A lot of things. Yeah. But yeah, small form factor especially. I remember doing that video with him, and I think because did we run on your channel or mine on PC World?
The small form factor one was on our channel. Yeah.
Okay, because I remember some of the comments, and I remember reading them. I was like, I don't think some of these people, I don't think they get that, like, although yes, Gordon has strong opinions, he is playing it up.
Yeah, it's always a bit.
Oh yeah.
Well, except for when it's not. I mean, sometimes it's not a bit.
No, you know what? And that's the problem. I fall into that trap all the time. Like especially with the small form factor thing. Like he'll start it and he'll start to reel me in, and then I'll get all worked up, and then afterward I'll be like, God damn it, he totally he laid that trap and I just walked straight into it. He doesn't really care that much. He just cares that I got heated on it.
Yeah, well, I think he pretends to care more and more as like it almost makes it like the people who don't pick up on it are the ones who are providing entertainment for Gordon.
Oh yeah, you're pouring gas on the fire at that point. Yeah. Look, as somebody who used to play the straight man for him when he did the rant on the Max PC podcast, you just had to ask the question. You just had to cue him up and get him going, and then see what was gonna get him going more and more. So,
Well, a small form, or what size tower?
For me, I run larger towers normally, typically full tower.
Is it just because it's easier to swap stuff out, or
accessibility? Yeah, I can. Everything's very accessible, and even though ITX has gotten relatively standardized, it's like I just like knowing that if something, I don't know, it comes back to the reliability stuff where downtime is what kills me because I don't really have that much time to do things outside of work. So if I lose an hour, it really sucks. You know, like the percentage of free time is very high. And so I need to be able to pull a video card, and if I only have a 3-slot card around, it needs to be able to fit. So just that aspect is easier. You lose the mobility, obviously, but you know, we don't really. If I need to go anywhere, I'll bring a laptop. So
no LAN parties for you?
No.
Will, how do you feel
So when I was doing more stuff with hardware, like the big tower was definitely it, right? Because you could swap video cards and you could swap stuff in and out really easily. Now that the PC is much more of a thing that I build and like maybe swap out a video card every once in a while, it's like I go with the small towers, like that Fractal Meshify compact that we built in last year has been fabulous. It's a little like it's with the USB hub and a lighting. I put a stupid lighting controller in a couple of weeks ago.
It's not stupid.
And like it's a little tight in there now on the back. The way that they do the back, so the back panel just pops open. Maybe not my favorite thing about that case, but the rest of it is there's no cheating with those. Is I guess you can't just jam it in there and then screw it shut and it'll have a slight bulge. But yeah, ITX is if you could do an ITX size case with 2 slots with an extra PCI Express slot, I would be all in on the small cases. Oh well.
Yeah. Now that you make a good point, like for me, it's different from work between. Personal and work. The personal stuff, I do feel lucky. I have a separate rig for gaming and a separate rig for work, and so yeah, the downtime on the gaming rig, whatever, just means that I don't play. I play the game of you know, benchmarking or reconfiguring. So, but I do feel like for me, and I've stressed this before on the show, like it actually made me a better PC builder to learn how to build in small form factor.
That's for sure.
Yeah, not only on like understanding the parts, but then the cabling and having to think about it, but then also on the back end of like, okay, I never really learned how to like mess with fan curves that much until I got to small form factor. You know, so it was just like I definitely it forced me to learn things I never would when it was just a bigger tower. Throw it in there, it's fine.
I think that's what I've come to appreciate as well as small form factor. To me, it seems like a lot of the fun is the challenge of actually like it forces you to actually go through and look at components and really try to match things in a more perfect way. Whereas like you're saying with both of you saying with a full tower, it's just kind of whatever, everything's gonna work. Who cares?
Yeah. Well, it's the difference between a motorcycle and a like a Camaro, right? Like it's like the small form factor. Yeah, you know, you got to know what you're doing a little bit more there. The Camaro, you're just going to mash the pedal down and you're going to leave tire on the pavement.
Yeah, I will say so I have a Fractal. Oh crap! It's the Terra. I have a Terra, and I know the exact GPU length that I can fit in there. And so every time I see a new GPU come out, I'll be like, ooh, how long is that? Like MSI has slim 4090s coming out, and I know that they're 322 millimeters because I know that's exactly what I can fit in a Terra. So I'm like, oh, can I get a 4090 in there?
It's funny we're talking about this because I have to move my daughter's PC. She's on an ITX, like an old Ryzen 4, I guess. And she has a huge ITX case that I used to use when I was doing VR stuff with a handle that I would carry around before we had VR capable laptops. I carried this small form factor around with me to do demos, and I've got it. We're moving the computer into her bedroom, and I've got to get her a smaller case because that thing is enormous and stupid. So if people have recommendations, please hit me. I would love to know what you like in the ITX space.
Nice. Here we go. So a couple more. We can skip that one. Oh, here's
you want to? One more point on this. If you look up the Rosewell throne, I think is it V2? No, that's the Thor. Roswell Throne is the case that I have my system at home in.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
it launched. So AnandTech has a review of it from 2013,
Oh,
and it
Okay.
has a
Wow.
cool feature. You can push the slider button on the top, and then the vents open.
nice.
Oh, and you got the support for the side fan. That looks like what,
Yeah,
280? Wow,
I've
how big is that?
replaced. I think that it might be a 200 or a 220. I don't remember, but
Oh, 230. Interesting.
okay, 230. I've replaced two of them now because that was back when the larger fans, the weight, I think it was the weight of the fan itself, like the blades, the weight of all that was causing blades to literally shatter and like explode.
Wow.
So every now and then, like you would hear it go like bang, and just a piece of plastic rattle around in the case. So I've had two of those fail, and then I've had like two of the front fans die. I've had one CLC die, but
God, that's
the heart
hilarious.
of the computer is the same.
This reminds me of what was it, the Silverstone Raven, the
Yeah.
side, the rotated one where the ports were all on the top. It had the same kind of front, that weird front panel.
Yeah.
Real good.
That's funny. Friend of the show, Ziv asks, do you think we'll start seeing dedicated AI cards inherit or supplant the role of graphics cards in the future? Do you think we'll be slotting in our PCI slots with AI cards, dedicated AI cards in the future?
I mean, you can already buy a dedicated ML card that's loaded up with compute cores from NVIDIA. They're happy to sell that to you if you want to do machine learning stuff.
Oh, perfect. We're there.
Yeah.
But for the general consumer, you think we'll see something low end?
I mean, it seems like no. It seems like the CPU manufacturers and the GPU manufacturers are fighting over that space already. So I don't know that people have slots, frankly.
My inclination is no, just because I feel like multiple times now, and I was always a fan of it, but there have been attempts to get those secondary or tertiary PCI devices like PhysX cards and second GPUs and things like that. And it seems like we keep coming back to single device. So I don't know. I guess the single discrete card has a lot of capabilities these days. Maybe they want to preserve that dedicated thing for heavier spenders.
I mean, yeah, you look at what was it? Bigfoot had the network processing unit, which lasted a year maybe, and then they started selling them to laptop manufacturers, I think. There was an audio processing unit that was actually super cool and just got killed by lack of API support in games. And then the PhysX stuff, of course, NVIDIA bought, and it's just part of the GPU now. So I think that's the way it's going to go.
So Dr. Ian Cuttress, Technic Potato, says, I'm trying to get Intel to sell a large version of their Meteor Lake NPU on an M.2 card. They've been selling something in OEM for a couple years. Yeah,
wow, that's a trip.
right?
I feel like that's also that's the type of thing that I hear from Wendell about a lot, where Wendell will bring up this facet of hardware I've never really even considered or thought about. I forget what it was. He just did this a couple days ago. There was something he was really excited about that Intel was kind of reducing the focus on. It wasn't Optane, it was something else. But it was in that same vein where he's like, no, there's this really cool stuff you can do with it. And he explained it to me, and I completely agree with him. But it's just like, maybe the dollar signs aren't big enough, or maybe the supply is short and they need it for other things. I don't know, but those conversations are always fun.
I mean, there's a lot of those that they leave by the wayside before they reach fruition. Like look, if they'd pushed on through Larrabee and spent the 10 years between when they killed it and now, probably a different outcome for Intel on the kind of high end compute ML side.
A friend of the show, Davina, sums up Wendell in a great way: mad scientists and their FPGAs. Yep, there we go. That's Wendell in a nutshell. A couple more, and then we'll get out of here. So friend of the show, Dark Helmet asks, why don't more SSD reviews highlight the flash memory type, such as TLC or QLC?
We did when we did SSD reviews a decade ago.
Do you think it matters, or who should it matter for? I guess.
My knowledge is so outdated on SSDs that I wouldn't be comfortable making a firm statement on it. I definitely, at the time, when there was a time where I was really studying them and we were trying to do something with it, and based on that knowledge, I would say yes, it matters for endurance and people who effectively want the drive to survive like a hard drive might survive. But my knowledge is so out of date that I don't know how.
Will, do you look into any of that stuff?
I mean, when I last looked at SSDs, we were talking about 64 and 128 gig ones from a professional standpoint. So, the problem we had in the early days was that vendors would put the same model number on different drives based on size and relative performance. So you might have two different kinds of controller or whatever in the same SKU. So it was hard.
Oh, they still do that, right? Wasn't that a Samsung thing that came up recently?
I mean, it happens at hard drives, I know, where they do. I mean, until everybody got really angry with Western Digital a few years ago, and maybe they've stopped now.
Okay. Yeah, we got to get there soon. Friend of the show, VC Jester, asks, when should we expect a merch partnership with Gamers Nexus and PC World? Steve riding an Outrage pony. I can't think of a better person to ride such a steed.
I mean, I'd be down for that. We can figure that out.
Well, like how would you be riding the pony? Are you a hand up in the air kind of guy with?
I don't know. Do you have like the cowboy lasso, or
right? Yeah.
Yeah. What's the ideal armament for riding an Outrage pony, and what powers does the pony possess?
Right.
Like a USB-C cable or a 12 volt GPU
high power,
maybe.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah,
that is a good one. Dan.
Yeah.
I was sort of imagining a Fabio kind of book cover.
Oh, just Fabio with the hair. Oh yeah, we should do that too.
Like the pony's just over Steve's shoulder, just nuzzling him softly.
or he's just like leaning his head against the steed and just
the Outrage pony shirts. You guys sent us some shirts a while ago, and I think there were 2 or 3 Outrage pony ones in that, and so I put them out in the office. Sent a message like, hey, if anyone wants some shirts, there's some shirts out there. And I came out maybe 15 minutes later, and all the Outrage pony ones were gone.
All right, well, we need to send you more then, because it sounds like
They're
you didn't get one.
popular.
We got to get you on. And Robert Lawrence says we can call the collaboration PC Gamers World Nexus. PC Gamers
I love
World
it.
Nexus. Yeah. There you go.
Very concise.
Yeah. All intercapped, no spaces.
All of the brands.
Yeah. PCGWN. There we go. I like that. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me. We're going to wrap this up. I could sit here and talk for hours on end. I really appreciate it. Will, how would you want people to come find you and consume your mountains of content that you spray?
They should just check out the Tech Pod. You can find it as Brad and Will made a Tech Pod on all the podcast services, including the soon-to-be defunct Google Podcasts. And if you like video games, try out the Anacrusis. It's on Steam and Xbox. It's $20. We're launching out of early access next month, and
what was the name?
The Anacrusis, ANACRUSIS. It's a 4-player, 1 to 8 player co-op game in the vein of Left 4 Dead, made by
Cool.
Chet Falasek, who was the lead at Valve on Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2. And we have like the traditional versus mode where one team plays as the humans, one team plays as the aliens. We have mod support. It's all the stuff that people don't put in games anymore. And I think we had a pretty rough. I mean, Chet talked about it on TikTok a lot, but we had a rough launch into early access, and we've been working for almost 2 years now. Have done 50. By the time we get out, we'll have 52 updates probably.
Oh, cool.
Where we just work with the community and we listen to what they say, and we built the game the same way I tested, and the same way we worked at Maximum PC, where we listen to what the people who are using it say and make changes based on that. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been fun to learn about making games instead of just playing them and benchmarking them for once. So
when do you feel like what was the I don't know how to word this, like when was the decision to be like, hey, you know what, It's 1.0. It's ready for launch. How do you figure that out?
I mean, part of it is like feature completeness, right? Like we wanted to have mod support, we wanted to have versus, we wanted to have the bots in a position where you can play either the co-op game just to, with one player, and you can play through the whole campaign just with the bots, or you could play versus mode and you could play against the bots and have a good experience like that, where you play as the aliens and you get to kind of practice that and learn how they work, because it's a little weird playing asymmetric games with other people, because you mess up, you ruin everybody else's game too. Part of it is like there's perf stuff. Like we run on the Xbox One and the Series consoles, which are, the Xbox One is a pretty old piece of hardware at this point, and just getting the perf to a place where the game loads in a reasonable period of time off of the spinning Rust and all that stuff has been a little bit of a challenge. And like obviously it has to be fun, right? Like the fun's always been there. But launching into early access, we had some performance problems and we had matchmaking issues, and like it turns out making a multiplayer game as your studio's first title pretty complicated. We learned a lot along the way, but I think we're in a pretty good spot now, and we're excited to see what comes next for it. Right?
We were talking about this internally with stuff like No Man's Sky recently with Starfield, coming out. How the way games, it seems like games are now in an era where after launch, without necessarily going to expansion packs or DLC or whatever, it's not like you launch it and then, okay, however the launch goes writes the history for that game forever. Like it's very clearly like the ship can still be steered after it launches, which is pretty cool.
I mean, the amount of people I've seen recently be like, oh wow, the 2.0 update on Cyberpunk is what's finally gonna get me to play that game.
Yeah,
it's just like, wow, I've heard a lot of people like getting back into it for the first time, or like going back because they bounced off early.
It's tough because that first impression does make or break your game a lot of times, right? Like we launched into moderate reviews on Steam and pretty negative reviews on Xbox because our performance was pretty bad on Xbox at launch. Like No Man's Sky is a really good example because that's it's an expensive budget for an indie game, but it's a modest budget compared to like Starfield or something like that. And it's a weird, like it's tough for like reviewers, right? Because you're in a situation where like the $20 that they spend on my game at launch or the $20 that they spend on Hades, like it's the same $20, and Hades was a much better game. It's a wildly different game, of course, but like Hades was a much better game at launch than we were. And if you were spending $20 on one game, then Hades is the game that people probably should have bought last January. At the same time, the constant updates, like it gives you an opportunity to turn it around in a way that you couldn't before. And then it's a challenge of like, Steam is weird with early access stuff in particular, in that they don't really promote it at all. Like you don't see very much front page promotion, unless you're like one of the handful of breakout early access games like Astroneer or Dead Cells or something like that. So like there's a calculation about when you think you're good enough that you'll get the big media push on the initial release, that you're going to sell the number of copies that you want to sell so you can make another game or keep updating the first game or whatever your goals are. And it, like you never know if your answer is right until after the thing happens, and then you're like, well, we did that right, or no, we really messed that up badly, and now we're all going to go work at Sears selling refrigerators, I guess. So
Toys R Us is coming back, I heard, in the US.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly.
Nice. Yeah, definitely go check. Last question, maybe I asked you this before. Do you have a benchmarking mode in the Anchor?
We do not, because that takes like we're at the biggest we were about 18 people, 20 people. Now we're 5 or 6 and a couple of contractors. Building in a benchmarking mode. We do have the ability to record a demo, and you could play that demo back. We have not built in a benchmarking mode, because like that would have meant somebody not doing something else that actually, like it is literally the thing that people told me for years. It's like, hey, we had to focus on the things that people are going to play in the game, and I know you would have loved to have a benchmark, but also like our game's weird. We have a lot of AI because there's a bunch of NPCs. Like we have sometimes 70 or 80 aliens on the screen at once. So there's a lot of AI going into those. So they hit CPU really hard, and like
that would be good for a benchmark. We don't got enough CPU bottleneck benchmarks.
Look, if somebody wants to write me a check to put a benchmark in the game that will pay for the engineer for 2 weeks, then I will absolutely do it. But
how intensive is the how CPU intensive is it?
It depends on how many.
Like, could I show a better question, I guess? Would I be able to show a distinction between, say, an i9 like 13900K and an i7 13700K? You know, when you're up at that upper echelon, do they diverge?
I honestly, I
if
don't.
I can, I'll write the check.
I will send you.
Right.
I'll send you some codes, Steve. And
Okay.
And I haven't. I honestly haven't looked at it that much. It's not super. It's not. I mean, we're multi-threaded like most games are, but we hit 4, maybe 5 cores on the outside.
Sure, yeah.
And it's not like, because it's also in the Xbox One, all of the AI stuff has to run on the Xbox One. I think we have a different path for it. Just because we, like, if you're playing solo on an Xbox One, you don't typically get quite as many aliens, and you can't host. By default, you don't host games in the matchmaking pool.
Replays tend to work pretty well, though, in our experience.
Yeah,
Just play it. Yeah.
I mean, the replay stuff is in there, so you could record yourself playing the game and run Fraps or whatever the current modern version of Fraps is on top of that, and get something that's repeatable, I think. So I'll get Adam to connect us and send us some codes.
Talk about that. Dr. Ian Cuttress would like to point out a benchmark mode helps your game get visible on all computer hardware reviews in the future.
It is. It's just, I mean, when you're this small a team, it is just an absolutely, like, we literally cut stuff. Like, we cut features that we love all the time because they're either not good enough or we don't have time to make them good enough, or it's heartbreaking sometimes.
Yeah.
The other question for me is the demo playback based on calculating physics during the demo, or is it recalling a pre-calculated table?
It's the normal Unreal demo playback. So I believe the physics for ragdolls and stuff like that, which, by the way, we do let you configure the number of ragdolls you have on the screen at once, and the corpse decay. I believe that the physics is calculated, but the AI is probably not. So my guess is that it is a little bit less CPU intensive because of that, when I think about it.
And especially for the AI specifically. Okay.
I didn't expect to get grilled on this today, so I'm not prepared. I apologize.
I'm actually genuinely gonna check it out for some benchmarking options, just because CPU side especially, we're always looking for stuff.
Right.
It's kind of hard sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember, especially for games. Yeah.
Anyway, Steve, how would you like people to support you?
Subscribe to PC World. Watch our videos with Gordon and Adam on the PC World channel.
Yeah, we should just play him back on loop.
Yeah. There you go.
People watch the crossovers, the many crossovers you guys have done over the years.
Yeah. No, I mean, for us, it's just the channel right now. We'll have some news outside of that in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. But yeah, just the YouTube channel as always. Gamers Nexus.
When is the new mod mat coming out? Because I have the first generation one, and it's getting a little long in the tooth. But I don't want to buy the next one if you got a third one coming out.
We launched the GN15 one probably about a month or two ago. At this point,
so it's safe to get.
I'll send you it, because I actually really like that design, because we took some of the stuff we learned from just working with the colors on the mat over the years and kind of made it more vibrant in some areas. So I like that one. It's got a lot of, we put the front panel connectors on it.
Hell yeah.
A lot of people were asking for that over the years, and I agree, front panel connectors are very frustrating sometimes, so we put those on there. They're nice and large. So
hell yeah. No, I was like, at some point I did have this thought recently. We did a live build, and I was like, man, at what point am I gonna finally I think I'm almost to that point where I memorized what's what, but I'm not quite there yet, because I've messed around with it too much. Gamers Generation in the chat says, I sleep with my signed mod mat. Don't ask for photos, they're not presentable. Also, I noticed on the mod mat, the original mod mat that you had sent us years ago, we have like enough skin cells on that one, that it's just probably worth something.
Clone everybody in the office.
Yeah,
that's not something to brag about.
No, it's
horrible homunculus.
It's like Gordon and I's skin cells just all
merging
in that. Yeah. New DNA. Anyway, thank you everybody for hanging out on this this awesome edition of the Full Nerd. And thank you, Dan, for running the verticals and horizontals. Why don't you take us out of here?
All right, see you, everyone. Whoop.
Nice.
That was really fun.
Yeah, that was fun. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you, Adam.
Yeah, no, it was a damn good time. Thanks.
Also,
thanks for hanging out.
great meeting and talking with you, Will.
Yeah, it's great